Welcome to Morbid Horror, where we share true haunting stories. Story 1, Help Me. By Best Friend Watermelon. A few years ago my boss went on holiday for a couple of weeks to Spain. Midway through the holiday he got a phone call from the police informing him that his sister had passed away in a fire in her flat. So he rushes back home early, deals with the police and the passing, and everything. My employers told him to take some time off to grieve, which he duly did. When he came back to work on a Monday morning a few weeks later, we invited him into our coffee room to talk and offer him our sympathies and support. About half an hour later he excuses himself to start work. He walks into his office, sits down at his desk, turns on his computer, and checks to see if there are any answer phone messages. And the very first message that plays is his sister, screaming down the phone, "Help me! Help me! I'm trapped, I can't breathe." Still sends chills down my spine to think about it. As you can imagine, he was pretty traumatized. Story 2, The Voice by Nugget Princess. My grandfather told me this story about how one time he was sitting in a chair in front of the house when he heard his wife repeatedly calling him from inside the house. The thing is, my grandmother passed away a few years before that. But he told me that the voice was so pressing that he actually got up to look inside the house, and as soon as he got inside he heard a loud crash behind him and turned around to see that the chair he had been sitting in moments ago had been crushed by the cast iron gutter that fell on it. If he didn't come inside the house he would have probably been seriously injured. Every time I think about it, it sends chills down my spine. Story 3, I Just Need a Haircut by Happy Hobbit. I was an RA in a dorm for 2 years in college. A girl who had been having stress issues finally snapped. She was found by someone in a dark stairwell. I was in an older dorm, circa 1887, so there were plenty of nooks and crannies. By the time she was found she had already torn out over half of her hair and had eaten it. She just kept on saying, "I just need a haircut," in a perfectly normal voice. It took 6 of us and the police sedating her to finally get her strapped down to an ambulance gurney. To this day I can't forget how powerful she was. She couldn't have weighed over 120 pounds, yet she had this sort of superhuman ability to rip her arms away to tear out another clump of hair and stuff it into her mouth. All with a perfectly straight face. Story 4, Car at the Red Light by Elios. Driving home with a buddy from the high school summer job at the local amusement park. It's about 3 in the morning, and there is no traffic at all. Get stuck at the red light that never ends, and while we are waiting, another car pulls up next to us. A big black hearse, in immaculate condition, with a clown in the driver's seat, with full makeup and costume on. He never moved, didn't look at us, nothing. Just stared straight ahead the whole time. Number 5 Apocalypse is Coming by S.L. Tribb. In September 2014, a Utah boy discovered his parents and 3 brothers deceased after arriving home. The Salt Lake Tribune reported finding a to-do list in the house, which included tasks like feed the pets and find someone to watch the house written on it. The found list gave the impression that the parents were preparing to go on vacation. However, there was no suicide note, no warning that they would do this, and no explanation. After autopsies, it was revealed that the 5 family members consumed a lethal concoction of drugs that September day. However, why and how the parents and kids consumed the drugs remained a mystery. Sometime later, police revealed more terrifying information about the case. According to family members' statements, the parents' motivations included believing that the world's end was near and frequently spoke of leaving this world. Apparently, scared of the apocalypse, the parents poisoned the kids and themselves. Story 6, Milwaukee Cannibal by W. Between 1978 and 1991, American serial killer and ex-offender Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, monikered as the Milwaukee Cannibal, slayed and dismembered 17 men and boys aged 14 to 33. Dahmer dismembered and kept their organs and bones in his home and used them for carnal pleasure. Sources claim that Dahmer was fascinated with deceased animals from a young age. When he was 4 years old, Dahmer may have noticed his father removing animal corpses from the house's foundation. This may have sparked his mania with deceased animals. Dahmer referred to animal bones as his fiddlesticks and was oddly pleased by the sound the bones made. In 1991, after one of his potential victims escaped, Dahmer was captured and admitted to his crimes. Despite being diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, and psychotic disorder, Dahmer was named to be legally sane at his trial. 3 years later, a fellow inmate fatally beat him. Story 7: The Perfect Crime by Smith. On November 10, 1923, Nathan Leopold committed to travel 6 hours from Chicago to the University of Michigan. Accompanied by his friend and lover, Richard Loeb, they intended to break into Loeb's former fraternity. But all they had taken was a typewriter, a few watches, some penknives, and around $80 in loose change. Leopold was agitated on the way back to Chicago because the robbery had been a big effort for a small payoff. When Leopold finally stopped complaining, Loeb began to discuss his idea of committing the perfect crime. While they continued to travel through the country roads toward Chicago, they broke into several homes and started a few fires, but none of their crimes had been published in the media. Loeb desired to commit a crime that would create a huge buzz: abduction and homicide of a child. After plotting their plan through the winter, in May, they kidnapped a child they knew had a wealthy father who would pay the ransom. Following the abduction, they beat the boy's skull with a chisel, jammed a rag down his throat, and disposed of the body. When the two returned to the city, Leopold dropped the ransom letter into a post box. However, their plan to execute the perfect crime failed. The following day, a passerby spotted the child's lifeless body, and soon the police traced Leopold by finding the eyeglasses he dropped near the body. On May 31st, 10 days after the homicide, both young men came clean and revealed to the state's attorney how they had slayed Bobby Franks. Nathan Leopold confessed that they had killed Bobby only for the thrill of it. At the time of the murder, Richard Loeb and Nathan Leopold were 18 and 19 years old. They were sentenced to 99 years in prison. Story 8: Cell Phone Stalker by ABC. In 2007, ABC News reported on a series of ominously precise grave threats made to different families via cell phones. The families claimed that the calls, which threatened to slay their children, pets, and grandparents, came in any time at night. According to one family, the callers seemed to know when the kids left for school and when they were home alone. Families also received voicemails with recordings of their private conversations. According to the victims, the caller was aware of their activities and what they were wearing. The family of Courtney Kuykendall, 16, said that her cell phone started sending text messages to her friends by itself in February, which is when the family's problems began. The Kuykendall family also reported a caller having a scratchy voice and threatening to slice their throats, which continued for months. Story 9: Anonymous Caller by Wiki. Around 1980, a single mother of a toddler, Dorothy Jane Scott, started getting threatening phone calls at work. She paid the calls little attention until one night when the ominous voice on the other end of the line instructed her to look outside. On her car's windshield was a single withered rose. The stalker would alternate between declaring his love for her and making threats of physical harm. The caller's voice sounded familiar, but Dorothy couldn't place who it was. and she never got to find out. At a staff meeting, Dorothy noticed that one of her co-workers appeared unwell. She and another co-worker took the man to a neighboring hospital. Dorothy went outside to the parking lot while her two co-workers waited for the prescription to be filled. She wasn't seen again after that. According to her co-workers' testimony, they went outside to meet her in the parking lot after she didn't return. They suspected a problem had occurred with her son when they spotted her car rushing away as soon as they left the building. Neither her son nor anyone else ever saw or heard from Dorothy again. Her burned remains were discovered at a construction site 4 years later. The discovery of a collection of dog bones next to her remains added even more confusion to the case. No one has ever been found guilty or detained on suspicion. The caller has never been located. I hope you like these